Boom! What up? What up? What up? What up, world? It's your boys, the Pogs, and man, do we have a show for you guys? I have just spent the last 30 minutes before the show geeking out, and I am still super excited. We have who I feel is the illustrator of a generation with us today. I have no way to put into words how this guy made me feel sitting in a 100-degree porta john in the deepest, darkest pits of hell, reading his comics, and that is the the genius that is Mr. Mark Baker, creator of Private Murphy's Law and inspiration to a generation. And as always, we got Chappie. You know, he gets second bill this month, this week. So any other day, Chappie's my favorite veteran. But today,
I'm still active. I'm not a veteran yet.
I am in full fanboy mode. Mr. Baker, sir, it is an honor. Thank you for coming to our show. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. And thanks for that intro. That was really over the top, I think, but appreciate it.
I meant every word. So, all right, let's get this thing kicking off. We got the fastest hour on the internet, and here we go. So, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us how it all started, how it all came to be.
Just the cartoons. So, I mean, I've always liked to draw. Even when I was a kid, I've always drawn. I didn't start doing the cartoon until my second. I had my first enlistment. I got out. I got recalled for Desert Storm. I got out again. Came back in, and during that time, I got to go to college for a little bit. I think I was 2 weeks into my second semester before I got the letter saying, due to presidential executive order such and such, you got 2 weeks to get your ass back to Fort Knox. So, but in that time, I did a cartoon for the community college I was going to. I don't even remember the premise of it. All I know is that the characters were too nice. But then after coming back in, and when I arrived at Fort Bragg, I'd be doing cartoons for the guys in the unit, like inside jokes, making fun of the command. It wasn't going anywhere, just amongst ourselves. And they all kind of ganged up on me and said, "Hey, you need to take this down to Paraglide and get this published." So I did. I mean, I didn't take those cartoons because they were really too raunchy and just not ready for prime time reading. But I did the first cartoon I did was the 5 points of performance, and I brought that to the Paraglide. There was the editor there. His name was Sergeant Bean. I'll remember this guy forever. Because he gave me my big break. And he said, "Look, this is cool and all." And he said, "But I don't want just to have one cartoon." He said, "Can you give me something? We publish weekly. Can you get me a weekly cartoon?" And so I just, I went home and I said, "Okay, let's see what I can do." And then I started thinking about it and then figured out, okay, I'll have this, just take this soldier through, enlisting, basic training, jump school, so forth. And then I just started drawing the cartoon. And I'd bring him a cartoon every week, or I'd bring him a few cartoons every week that you could space out. And then I've just been doing it ever since. And it's been, that was 92, I think. So a long time. I've been doing this cartoon for a really long time.
I'll tell you, I was excited to see Private Murphy grow through the years. I think one of the biggest celebrations I had, I think we were in Rawa when Private Murphy became Sergeant Murphy, I believe. And I'm telling you, like it really and truly felt like one of us made it. You know what I'm saying? Like that E4 Mafia is like, yo, we finally got one of the good guys in, and it just, it just transformed me. So, growing up, were you a fan of comics growing up, or did you just fall into it, or you just it just came natural to you?
No, I was always a big fan of comics. I read a lot of comic books when I was younger. That dropped off after I joined the Army because there just wasn't time or, whatever. But yeah, I like all the classics: X-Men, Captain America, I was more of a Marvel fan than DC. So
Mm-hmm.
Batman wasn't my thing, or Superman, but on the other side, the Hulk,
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Mm.
And yeah, and then the comics and the papers, like Lance was saying earlier, Bill Watterson, the Calvin and Hobbes. That was a big one in the early to the mid '80s. And
I'll,
yeah, that's it.
I'll tell you, Dilbert was my guy back in the day growing up. The
Dilbert. So I got an interesting thing to say about that. So that community college that I was at, where I was drawing my cartoon with the two mice, Dilbert, he wasn't syndicated yet, not on in the regular newspapers, but he was syndicated in the college newspapers. So the college newspapers would get these different comic strips where they could choose, and it cost them whatever, 50 cents or $1 or whatever to use that cartoon. And Dilbert was one of them.
Oh wow.
And Dilbert was a college student. It was about, and they were all like college type gags in there.
Oh
So
my
then,
God.
and I remember that because, like, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years later, when I'm reading Dilbert in a regular newspaper, only now it's like, oh, he graduated, he got a job at some tech company, and here he is, and he's made it big. And I thought, wow, that is awesome.
That's
I wish I
amazing.
could do that.
I'll tell you, that's amazing how it works. Lance, you got anything you want to jump in or?
Well, yeah, it's just interesting to see. As we were talking, Mark was saying, "Hey, let's stay away from some of the politics," and you see that with Scott Adams. Scott said, I think, some pretty straightforward things, and he's been gone after by the people that disagree with him. But I grabbed one. I think it's a real recent one that I really liked, and it's the Murphy Through the Years.
Oh yeah.
And maybe my favorite one is that third one where he gets that grr face on him, like, these idiots. He finally figured out how just you idiots. But I saw that one. I went, I recognize that way too much. But I do have a question here, Mark. Since Murph was going up, at any point did Murphy consider going to OCS?
No, I tried to keep things. I mean, most of the gags and everything in there are obviously they're observational things that you see, on your day-to-day life in the Army. So when it comes to things that I haven't experienced, I do rely a lot on people's stories, right? Especially like from combat veterans would give me stories, and I would turn them into, not that combat is funny, but I would turn them into gags,
Yeah.
get a laugh. But things like, what is it like to be a lieutenant? I don't know. I mean, I can observe them from the outside, but I don't know what it's like to be that person, or even like a warrant officer or whatever. So I tried to keep it. I mean, Murphy, it's not autobiographical, but it is me. I mean, it is. I mean, I stretch things and I make it, fantastical, but it's mostly those were things, I either experienced or observed or whatever. And the thing about it is everyone, I think, not everyone, but I mean, I think it resonates so well with people is because this is the stuff they see too.
Yeah.
And if I can make something humorous out of it without being malicious, that was the whole goal.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw. And the reason I ask is I was enlisted for 15 years before I switched over to become a chaplain. So I was just curious if that was ever in the cards for you, something like that. But apparently not. I don't blame you either, honestly.
All right. So we kind of touched on it a little bit off camera. I kind of wanted to bring it back in and bring the conversation. Just the pure, when you first started, did you think that Private Murphy, I think you were in for maybe 14, 15 years in the Army times, I think it was. And just, looking back, did you think that it would have the impact on an entire generation of combat soldiers like it did?
Well, one, no, I really don't. know the impact it had. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I hear every now and then I'll hear stories like maybe, from someone like yourself. They'll say, "Oh man, when I was in Iraq or when I was in Afghanistan, your cartoons meant so much to me." And I think, "Oh wow," and it blows my mind because in earlier days, when I was trying to promote the cartoon, I would see soldiers and at the store in the mall or whatever, and I'd say, "Hey, do you know that cartoon Private Murphy? It's in the Army Times," and they would say, "No," but but now that you've mentioned it, we'll go take a look at it, right? So I've never felt like it had this giant impact, like everybody knows the cartoon and so forth. I mean, it's just something I do. I get a laugh, and the other thing is when I first started doing it, the first, nowadays with the internet and social media, you can get immediate feedback. But when I was getting it published in the Army Times, the only time no one ever writes you and says that was great, your cartoon made me laugh. Well, you piss somebody off, and they will take the time to sit down and not just give you a one-liner. They'll give you a whole page of, just a diatribe of just, what's wrong with you and how the whole thing. It goes way past the cartoon to a personal attack.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, so I wouldn't hear from people unless it was a negative thing. You know what I'm saying? So like the 10, I think it was 12 years it was in the Army Times. That was it. Negative feedback on.
That's what I'll never forget. One of my mentors, when I first started journaling, one of my mentors told me, he said, if you don't hear from people, you're not pushing the envelope far enough. Because he was like, it's fun, it's fun to be safe, but he was like, sometimes you got to push the envelope just to see where the line is, and you can get that feedback, and then you say, okay, well, I know not to cross that line anymore. Oh well, all right, they're a little sensitive about that. I know the drawback. So I know for me in my writings, it's one of those things like you kind of poke the bear a little bit to see what's gonna make him growl, and then once they start growling, you're like, all right, that's probably a little bit too hard. I'll pull back a little bit. Lance, you want to jump in?
But there's times to double down too, though, and I think we've seen that very, very recently from Mark. He did a cartoon with Murphy trying to do the deadlift for the new MRT, or I'm sorry, for the new ACFT, and the MRT guys, the Master Resiliency Trainer guys, went off on him and kicked him out of their forum. And it's funny because I hear more smack talking about doing the ACFT than I ever did the APFT. And so everybody kind of hates it. So the fact that Murphy was struggling with it to get that kind of hate just made me laugh. And then Mark doubled down on it. And I was like, that's great. Just, yeah. I love the South Park PC principal turning into an army bro. I posted that on my Facebook because it was just so funny. I thought it was great.
I mean, it was really my fault.
What happened?
Well, oftentimes you put something out there. I mean, it's. I had a mentor tell me one time there's a difference between intent and impact, right?
Yeah.
So regardless of what your intent is, you don't know what that impact is because it's going to vary to whoever sees something. Someone's going to think something's funny. Someone's going to get upset about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you have a large enough audience, you're going to get all sorts of reactions.
Yeah.
But where I'm really at fault is when they first came at me about the cartoon, the MFT page. I poked them personally. I mean, I understand. I mean, this is what they do. Everyone's proud about their thing, right?
Yeah.
Like whether it's your service or what you're doing in the service, your MOS. I mean, talk to any given Marine, right?
Yeah.
And you will see that people are very proud of their tribe, right? Yeah. So here was this tribe. One of their tribe members took issue with it. Well, a couple of them did. But anyway, instead of being an adult and just saying, okay, cool, I'm going to leave us alone. You know who, what's his name? Jesse Lee Peterson. Do you know this guy?
Not familiar.
He's a conservative, I don't know, talk show person. But anyway, when he interviews people and he's putting them down, he'll call them a beta, right? I'll say, beta, And anyway, the way he does it cracks me up. And so I called those guys beta. In my mind, I'm doing Jesse Lee Peterson saying beta, but in text, it don't look like that. It looks like, you know what I'm saying? If you're reading that, you're like, who's this guy calling me a beta?
Oh
You know, it's hard to bring humor across in text, right? I mean, you probably experienced this. So I did that. I called him a beta. He came back at me, and then, you know, we just regressed to the schoolyard.
Oh my God.
And then I took a screenshot of it and put it up on the site because I thought it was funny, you know? So really, I'm the jerk in the situation, 100%, but it's still funny to me. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like this. So I understand, you know, where people are coming from. And I hope they understand where I'm coming from. I'm really not trying to be malicious.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was, I could get so much more response off of Facebook.
Very much
Because
so.
I can see the things that are touchy and I can see the things that fire people up. And if I wanted to go that route,
yeah,
I could do that. And it would probably, you know, make the cartoon reach a wider audience, right? But I don't want to do that because I don't want to be, it's not malicious. I'm just trying to have fun and tell some jokes and stuff. But I understand where people are at in their heads, you know, because I used to be there. I used to be, I mean, I feel like I'm 56 years old. I'm older. I think I'm more mature now. But I can remember a time in the early 80s. There was a movie called Raising Arizona. Have you ever seen this movie? Nicolas Cage, right? So as a young kid, I'm like 19. I think it was on my first leave. I come home, I watch this movie. I'm from Arizona. I'm a Zony through and through. I love this state. And this is, you know, this is my place, my tribe. And it seemed to me at the time, at 20 or whatever, 1920, that movie was making fun of my people, my Arizona people. You know, it's saying we all live in single wide trailers. Those are starter homes. And, you know, and Nicolas Cage is going to prison and getting out. And I was like, I was so offended, right? But now I watch that movie and it's fantastic. It's nostalgic, not just because I think back of what an idiot I was at the time, but because it's funny. You know, there's plenty of things that are funny, but people will take it so serious. You know, I'm telling a joke. I'm not making a statement.
Yeah.
I'm telling a joke. But they'll even turn that around on you and say, well, that's what people do when they, you know, you offend somebody, you say it's just a joke.
That
you
is
know, so there's no way to win.
That's horrible. Have you ever experienced, like, in over the course of the Murphy comics and the series, have you ever experienced like anybody in like the Army officials coming back and giving you feedback or negative comments toward the comic?
Oh, absolutely. It was no, I've actually had people gunning for me, like wanted UCMJ action against me while I was still active duty.
Wait, what? Why?
Yeah. So
Disrespecting an NCO.
Well, it was, I mean, so I did a cartoon about when General Shinseki changed the headgear over to the black beret. Right? I mean, doggone, we're gonna take the Rangers beret. I mean, if anything, why not give everybody else if you're gonna do that, give everyone else the tan beret, leave the Rangers alone, right? But no, they did this. So I did a cartoon about it. And there was a major over at the Pentagon who, you know, he emailed me and said, look, you know, as a sergeant first class, you should know better than, you know, something about despairing Army policies. I'm going to JAG to see what the attorneys say about this.
Oh,
so I was freaked out. So I in turn went to JAG and said, hey, am I in trouble here? And they said, you know, you're doing a cartoon. It's on the op-ed page of the Army Times. No, you're not in trouble. You know,
oh God.
The guy needs to lighten up.
Yeah.
There's that. But plenty of times over the course of me doing the cartoon, I even had a battalion commander of mine tell me, hey, look, that last cartoon you did, we've had some complaints.
Holy smokes.
I'm like, okay, well, you know, I told them, you know, it's a weird thing that we all take this oath to uphold the Constitution, and part of it is freedom of speech.
Right.
And yet, whenever someone has an issue, instead of coming to me directly and saying, hey, I don't like what you're doing, or, you know, even expressing that opinion, they go to the command. You know, you're going to go to my boss and then have him, you know, pressure him to. So, plenty of time, plenty of things like that.
That's insane. For it's a comic in the op-ed section. Like my mind is blown right now. I was certain that you were going to be like, oh no, people realize that, you know, oh, it's a comic and, you know, you're able to laugh. That is insane. I am. Lance,
Well,
jump in. I gotta take my breath.
it's good to know that people have just as thin skin back then as they do now, because yeah, same thing. I mean, I can't tell you a story right now. Like I literally can't tell you a story, but it's very similar. Just like, really, you're going to go after somebody for that? And we had a special forces colonel come through when I was up at the chaplain schoolhouse, and we were asking him, you know, all the normal stuff. What do you expect from your chaplains and this? But he dropped one thing that just stuck with me. It's been 3 or 4 years now. He said, you know, we're at the point in the Army where we're so worried about everybody's feelings, while the Chinese are worried about killing Americans.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you know, back then somebody getting mad at a cartoon, a comic strip in the Army Times, no less, which means it's endorsed at least to some degree. I mean, somebody had to have signed off on it. It's not like you're going to just go up and you can put anything. You know, you have editors. People have to go through, or even if they just choose and say, hey, you know what, that's just not something we're going to do. And then for a major call you up and threaten UCMJ, that makes me very, very upset, because I see that in the Army even now. These threatenings of, if you don't do, you see it on Facebook all the time on Army What the F Moments. You know, somebody threatening, oh, we're going to charge you with AWOL if you're not there on Monday. It's like, do you guys not know what AWOL is? AWOL isn't you're not there on Monday. AWOL is a very specific charge in the Army. So yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me that much. I really wish, the biggest thing you said, Mark, there was, I wish that when people had problems with each other in the Army or the military, that you would go to the person that offended you first and give them the opportunity to explain what was there or even apologize. Because probably 98% of the time, you can clear it up, and it doesn't have to be go to command. It doesn't have to be an issue. It's just, hey, I'm man enough to say I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. If you're offended, I'm sorry. How can I make this right? And that's going to solve most of the problems. But that's not how that's not how the Army works. Certainly not how the general public works these days.
That brings up a good question. Do you think, if you could go back and reset the clock, Mark, do you think Private Murphy would thrive in today's climate in the service?
I don't know. I mean, it's doing okay. I mean, the thing is, it's I still have it ongoing. It's just that instead of being published in a paper now, it's published on the, you know, the internet, social media. And I think I have, you know, it's a thing. You know, I do look at the stats to see, you know, because Facebook has all these tools you can use.
Yeah.
You know, the information about your audience. So I see that the majority of people are older veterans, right? So I mean, I try to appeal to the youngsters, but I'm also out of touch with younger veterans.
Yeah.
You know, this is their world now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how it is. You know, things have moved on. So, but I think some of them still enjoy the cartoon. I mean, I still get some younger, you know, troops in there throwing some comments in, you know, being funny, giving me material. I mean, people do comments and it gives me material for my next comic.
Oh my God.
You know, it's fantastic.
I hate to put my old man hat on, but they can't have it. This one's for G-Watt. They got to go get their own. This one's for the 2000ers. They can't have this one. Murphy belongs to us. They can play with them, but they got to give them back. They are not allowed to keep them. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about. So we kind of covered a lot, man. We covered a lot. Time is flying by. So, what are some of the favorite drawings you had over the years?
My favorite, the cartoons that I did. Favorite.
Yep.
Well, the points of performance will always be, because that was my first, and I've redone it a few times in color. There's one. I wish I'd been more prepared. I would have had him here just to show you. But there's one where I have Murphy with some plexiglass stilts, and Sergeant Major's yelling at him to get off the grass, and he hops up on the plexiglass stilts. It looks like he's floating across which I thought was pretty funny and clever. And also the Sergeant Major that's depicted in there is actually a Sergeant Major I know.
Oh wow.
So no, I mean I would often do that. Like I want to put people into the cartoon because, well, it's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
I think if you can you pull it, especially when it was in the Army Times. As a matter of fact, my battalion sergeant major at Fort Huachuca was retiring, and so I drew the cartoon for him. I put him in it. I submitted the cartoon to the Army Times, and they wouldn't publish. That's just like you were saying. I had to go through editors. As a matter of fact, I had to go through like a gauntlet of editors.
Oh wow.
There was first the feature editor, and apparently they all got together and had a roundtable and decided which cartoons would be published or not, because oftentimes they would get kicked back.
Wow.
So they wouldn't publish that cartoon, and it was a very, it was super harmless. I just had like the first panel is he's sitting there at his desk, and Murphy's asking him, hey, Sergeant Major, as a senior NCO, what do you consider the most important factor of leadership? And then I have the next panel, and Sergeant Major just sitting there, and the next panel just sitting there, and then finally the fourth panel, he says, a quick mind. So it's just nothing, just a cute little funny thing, right? But they said, they told me, hey, Mark, it looks like you're making fun of a black man in this cartoon, so we're not going to run it. Jeez. And I said, I am making fun of a black man. He's my sergeant major, and I want to do this for him because I want him to be able to clip the cartoon out of the Army Times, and then I was going to frame it nice with the original drawing, to give to him. So that was little stupid things like that I would get from the Army Times that I just thought were so. I don't know. Maybe that was like a precursor to what we're looking at now. How things have become. People are so worried about optics or it's whatever it is nowadays.
That is weird. That would have been a hilarious. That would have been a hilarious. I don't see how. I guess maybe it's just the crude combat humor, or just the old school Army humor in me. I'm like, as a black guy, that's funny. Because it's not like, you're making fun of him for being black. You're making fun of him for being, This is not going the way I thought it would be. Because I was like, man, no way people would be this obtuse toward such a good, especially with the conversations you would have in the Army, and then growing up in the Army and having those relationships with leadership. You're like, man, like I remember sitting in our choos. And like, there's, we would get the Army paper, and like literally everybody on day shift or night shift in the top would have their own copy of the Army Times, and we'd all just be in there discussing the comic and laughing, and then adding our own instances to it. So like, I guess for me, I'm like, man, I don't know, like, man, I just assumed it was like, man, everybody just, this thing was the best thing since, peanut butter on a dry piece of bread in the desert, man. In the MRE. I don't know. Lance, what are some of your favorites? I got a couple, but I'm gonna say.
So yeah, I can't think of anything specific because I generally, when I see the different comics, I open them up, I laugh and like even stuff like my dad was the biggest Peanuts fan there is, and then Calvin and Hobbes. Yeah, I'm 51, so I grew up with Calvin and Hobbes. And same thing, if you said what's your favorite Calvin and Hobbes or whatever, I can think of one. And so it's where Calvin goes, I'm Superman, up and away, and he crashes to the ground. Hey, kryptonite, and it's just so clever because it's those three or four. But like even Charlie Brown, like it's more those instances of him talking to Lucy or the football, and with the stuff with Private Murphy. It's just being in those situations. There for some reason there's a few that I think about, like the ghost of CW5s who you can never find because they're out drinking coffee, and like Mark said, they're all things we see. You know, it's a joke if you see a CW5, even for me. You know, as a captain now, I'm like, wait a minute, are you really a CW5? Wow, I didn't think you I thought you guys were just myths. And they laugh at that stuff too. So I totally get it. I think it's just kind of funny. Although KJ, I did think it was funny. Like, did you think these were going to impact? It's like, Mark, how pretentious are you? How much did you think this was going to fix
No
the
way.
army?
Listen, no way. Listen, no, like, no. Like, just the like. So, all right. So, I can't. The name is escaping me, but the comic is still in my head, fresh as day. Right. The pair of socks coming from World War II. You guys familiar with it? Where the guy gave him his last pair of dry socks.
Yeah, Bill Malden. Bill
Yeah.
Malden's not.
Yeah. Like, so
Really
that.
go.
Yeah, so that was iconic to their generation, right? Like, and you know, so I'm sure, you know, he didn't have, you know, at the time he didn't think it would be iconic as it has. Like I was sharing with you the one you did for Veterans Day a couple of years ago. Man, it's almost been maybe a decade now. Where, you know, the guys were like, oh yeah, you know, we're going to get the free meals, we're going to do the barbecue, whatever, and then Private Sergeant Murphy standing there with the bag of flags saying, "No, I got other plans," and he's heading to the cemetery. So, like, for me, that was an
I remember
iconic.
that one.
See, that was an iconic comic for me. You know, on the same lines of here's my last dry pair of socks, because, you know, I had just lost some friends of mine who were very, very close to me, and to see that comic, like, you know, because I was going through that. All the guys, you know, we'd been back or whatever, and the guys were like, "Hey man, you know, I'm going to party or whatever." But in my mind at that time, you know, that it changed the meaning of Veterans Day for me forever, right? It and seeing that comic, it'll always stick to me and be that iconic moment. Like, yeah, that's what I was feeling at the time. Like, yeah, man, I'll catch up and party with you guys later, but I got to go see an old friend, and that's what I got from that. So that's what I meant by the impact on GY generation. I you know, like I said, I'm try not to fanboy out too much, but yeah, that's kind of what I mean. All right, we'll shift the subject. So let's talk about. I know we kind of talked about it in the past. Do you guys have any current favorite illustrators?
I love Michael Ramirez. We were just talking about that. I think the guy just to come up with 3 to 4 one panel, and I know it's political, but just the stuff he does, and then it's not just the idea, because I am not an artist at all. I can barely draw stick figures. So to be able to pump out that level of artistry in those individual panels, and the use of negative space and of color, just to me, it's incredible what he does on the political side. I think I'll bet if he sat down and actually tried to draw something, what would be considered classical art, he could probably do it. And that's, for me, that's one of the Substacks I subscribe to, is just because of how good he is. So for me, that's, other than Private Murphy, of course.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think Michael Ramirez, I think he's the best editorial cartoonist in the world. You know, not just the content, you know, how he does things, but the artwork. You know, it's top notch. You can't touch him. I don't know any other editorial cartoonist that can touch his work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think let's see, my favorite's Mike Lukovich out of the AJC. And I think it's a little bit of a homer bias because I kind of grew up reading it every day. So it's just kind of like, it just kind of stuck to me. Like I didn't, like, I think we just found, like, a couple of weeks ago, Lance was like, yeah, he's pretty left. And I was like, oh no, it's just like funny cartoons. Like, I never, like, I some of my earliest memories are you know, reading the strips by Lukovich. So like I never even thought about it being, you know, political. I just like, oh cool, that's a funny whatever. And then this Lance and I was talking about, I was like, no, I'm pretty sure he's middle of the road. And Lance was like, no, man, he's pretty left. So I had to go back and look at it, and sure enough, man, I was like, man, I don't know, man. I guess that's the creator in me to kind of look past the message and just appreciate the art. And I think that's where we kind of took a left turn in society, right? Everyone's so focused on the message, no one takes time to actually appreciate the art or the effort that the artist put into it, man. And I'm just, I don't know, man. It's disappointing, and that's kind of, I want us to get back to being appreciative, right? Like I can say, hey, man, that's a that's the worst fucking idea I ever heard, right? But god damn, that drawing was funny as shit. And excuse my crassness, you know what I mean? Excuse my crassness, but like I want people to be able to separate, you know what I'm saying? Separate their feelings from the artistry, because the artistry is what makes things iconic, man. Like you can't not see Private Murphy. And it's not, no matter what whether he's Private Murphy, a specialist, E4 Mafia, which was my favorite Murphy, or Sergeant Murphy, he's still gonna be that same endearing character that just, man, like he wants to do right, but sometimes stuff happens, man. Like you just stuck in it, man. And I don't know, man. I don't know.
So KJ, what you said about the appreciation, though, I think that's a theme we've seen now when we talked to Greg Easterbrook, when we talked to Beth Ann last week. As a culture, we're being trained not to appreciate value. We're being taught that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. If there's a possibility of something going wrong, it's going to. Greg just had on his Substack recently. There was I guess they had a breakthrough in England about batteries or their electricity and their CO2 usage going way down in Great Britain. And he said, and it was right there on the front page of the New York Times. Haha, just kidding. It was on page 14, because he points out that whenever there's anything bad that's going on, it's on the front page of the New York Times. But if it's good news, it's buried and it doesn't get the light of day. And so I think that, I couldn't tell you the artist, but there's one I thought. So when I get into comics, I go to gocomics.com and I will read, 2-3 months worth of comics in a matter of an hour or two, just because I'll get in that kick. And there's two that I really like. One, I don't know, Non Sequitur, I think comes off, some people have it listed as a political, but it's not. The Non Sequitur just are phenomenal. And then the Sunday panels that he does. But the other one, and I don't know if you guys know this one, Luann. I don't know what it is about Luann. I've been watching Luann and reading that comic strip for probably 10 years. And she went from kind of the very, I don't want to say crude drawing, but the evolved, the art evolved. But I'm still like, if I were to go in tomorrow, I'd go and say, oh, is Luann does she have a boyfriend yet? Who's she dating now? And did Brad and his girlfriend, did they get married? And how's he doing his firefight? Oh, and has she become a teacher yet? I don't know what it is, but there's certain, that's the thing I think about comics that are so great, is you don't have to get into every comic strip, but if there's one or two that kind of catch your eye, you follow them for as long as they're done. And I think that's one of the enduring things about Private Murphy is it doesn't matter how long it's been since I've seen a Murphy cartoon. If I'm flipping through Facebook and one pops up, it's like, oh, there's Murph. Okay, let's see what he's doing today. And so I don't have to go searching for Murphy, which is really cool. But yeah, there's certain ones that I just think, I don't know what it is, because other people might look at Luann and read it for a couple and just go, I don't get it. I gave my daughter because she didn't know Calvin and Hobbes. I bought a Calvin and Hobbes book, gave it to her. She's 17. She's like, does Dad expect me to read this? I'm like, it's Calvin and Hobbes. How dare you?
Did she eventually?
No, she still hasn't. She gave the book back. So I need to go. Well, I'm going to start with my 10-year-old and 14-year-old. I'm going to go through with that, sit down with them, and bedtime routine and do that. Yeah. But I was like, how does I don't understand anybody. Like, if somebody put a comic book on my bed and, just here's a little gift. I don't care if it was Peanuts to Fraz to Get Fuzzy. Oh, Get Fuzzy's great too. But whatever it is, the first thing I'm going to do is go, oh, well, what's this? And read a couple. But she's like, does he? Just nothing. I don't get that. So
I don't either.
That's nothing but heartbreak. So, all right. So, Mark,
failure as a father is what it is.
I was just telling him I got my 4-year-old. He's in the Spider-Man comic, so he can't read he can't read the bubbles or the blurs, but he likes the action. So he'll ask me what's going on and to read it to him, and he just likes flipping through the action and then he'll jump down and pretend to be Spider-Man for a little while and jump back in my lap, man. So I'm in that really magical moment where I'm starting to see the flame starting to flicker a little bit and the passion starting to grow. So I'm really excited. My wife, it's taking me everything not to just go overboard and just dump like a truckload of comics on the bed and be like, all right, lock yourself in a room for 6 months and don't come out until you've read every comic, because you got to know all these story arcs and all of this has to connect. And so I'm really just trying to take it real slow with him, and just let him enjoy. And what I found is watching him find his passion for comics is the same thing that my dad did with me when I was younger. Like, he just happened to find a box of comics on his route one day, brought them home, and was like, hey, you want these? And I was like, yeah, I got nothing else to do. And just out of that became a lifelong journey of just loving animation and just illustration and I'm excited to see my son get that same, that same kindling and that same passion. So yeah, man, we're weird. We're weird over here. We are a weird tribe. I call my kids the Raptors, and I'm slowly starting to learn how my vision is to create a comic series called Daddy Daycare, and it's basically just me in a retired life, because we started having kids late. I retired in 2018, and then I had my 6-year-old was my retirement present, and then 2 years after that, we were driving to Atlanta to go buy a boat, and found out that my wife was pregnant on the way to get the boat. So I had to call the guy and cancel the boat. So now my son's my boat, and and then I told my wife, I said, well, we got to get a new hobby, or I got to get a job, because I can't be at the house. This isn't going to be, financially suitable for our future if I stay at the house. So I had to get out and start doing some other stuff. But yeah, man, I don't know. Let's go. All right. So back on task. I apologize. We are up against it. 2D versus 3D animation. I know, obviously you came up in the 2D era, and that's kind of your wheelhouse. Have you experimented with 3D illustration or animation?
Yes, a little bit. So what's really cool, I mean, I think, I'm not saying cartoons and comics are a thing of the past, but I think that the future is animation, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's 2D or 3D. And the thing is, anybody can do it. I use a software. It's free. It's called Blender, right? It's freeware. You can download it, and not only can you make 3D models that people can print,
Wow.
but you can do animation. You can do film editing. I don't know how to do all this stuff. I'm still learning, and I've been working with it for like 3 years. I mean, there's a learning curve. You have to learn how to use the software. But it's just, I mean, but yeah, you can do 3D, 2D. And now, today, currently, you can do, if you're an illustrator or an artist or whatever, you want to do these types of things, you want to do these creative things and try to make a little money at it. The internet is such a boon for creators, right? I mean, people there's people that are famous from being on TikTok. There's people like you all doing podcasts, your short films you're making, right? I mean, in the past, and not that long ago, like 20 years ago, you had to be like discovered, so you either had to have someone publish you in a newspaper or magazine and so forth, or you'd have to pitch your story or whatever to a studio that would make the animation or the film, right?
Yep.
But now the sky's the limit. If you put in the work and you can do it, there's people out there making short films that are, Pixar,
Absolutely.
industry standard 3D and 2D animations that they're just putting out there on YouTube and getting famous for it.
Yep.
So although I think social media is kind of a hellscape because all the things we talked about is people are gonna, they're gonna attack you and say mean things to you and the whole 9 yards. But also the flip side is it gives it this venue where you can do all this. I mean, there's people making a living, so I think that's cool. So, but yeah, to your initial question, 2D, 3D, eventually I think I would like to move away from doing, panel cartoons to doing animated cartoons with voice and the whole 9 yards, and that'll just be the new thing. I just don't have the skill. I don't have the skill to do it just yet.
So that was kind of going to be my question is with that is, were you ever approached to expand Murphy into more than just the strip, whether it was a short, whether it was a pilot for a cartoon? Were you ever approached for something like that?
So 2 times I've been approached. The one time I was approached to have the cartoon syndicated, I think it was Universal Press. I mean, you understand, I've been sending this cartoon out for years and years and years, right? Rejection letter after rejection letter.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did get contacted one time. I think it was Universal Press, because he said, "Hey, we're looking at doing a military we're looking for a military comic other than Beetle Bailey." And I thought I had it made. I thought, oh my God, they're going to syndicate my comic. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
Right. That's,
Yeah.
But then nothing happened. And then it just petered out. Nothing. I never heard from the guy again. And then another time I had a guy, he's also a veteran, and his friend worked for, maybe his friend was a veteran too, I'm not quite sure, but anyway, his friend worked for Warner Brothers and was like the lead guy that did Black Adam and what else? No, I can't think of the cartoons. But anyway, he was like an executive doing these animated things for Warner Brother. And we talked on the phone, and he said, "Hey, I like your work. This is possibly something we could turn into an animated series." And once again, I was very excited, and that petered out too. It turned into so. Yeah, so I had 2 false alarms, but it was exciting for that moment when I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is really going to go someplace," but it didn't.
Yeah, I call the rejection letters my motivation pile. I just keep them all up, just keep them all in one folder here under the office tables. And sometimes I just kind of look through them and be like, "Oh man, I can't wait. I can't wait till I get on that stage one day, because I'm going through it's going to be my Michael Jordan moment." I'd like to thank all the people who rejected me over the years. So, all right. So with it being, Cinco de Mayo and shenanigans being just, I guess, second nature to the military environment, do you guys have any favorite memories, maybe of celebrating Cinco de Mayo with the guys, or just Army shenanigans in general? Uh-oh.
Gosh. Well, yeah, I mean,
they just plead wait a minute.
So, no, for me, it was, I'm LDS, so I don't drink. So for me, it's like Cinco de Mayo is like, it's May 5th. May 4th, being a huge Star Wars geek, when I was in Kuwait in 1718, so KJ, that was the deployment. You would have been there with us if you hadn't popped smoke. They did a May the 4th fun run, and that was really cool, because that was when the Last Jedi, I believe, was being released. So we were real close to the release, and they were telling us, "Hey, this is what's going to happen." A former sergeant major works for Disney. He's going to come out and we're going to have a special screening of the Last Jedi.
Oh, wow.
So this was supposed to happen on like Friday or something. I get a call, and it's my chaplain assistant, and he says, "Hey, chaplain, I don't think they're playing Thor Ragnarok tonight. There's a line, they're playing Star Wars tonight." And it was supposed to be the next day was supposed to be the premiere, right? And I'm like, come on, there's no way. So I go down, and there's this line. I'm asking a few people in the line, like, "Hey, do you know this is happening?" They're like, "No, this is what we heard." So me being me, and KJ, this will totally surprise you. I walked right up to the door, knocked on the door. They open up. They're like, "Hey, nobody yet." I said, "Hey, I just want to confirm. Everybody out here is there's a rumor that this isn't Thor Ragnarok. It's a new movie. Is that what's going on?" And they went, "Yeah."
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, "Okay, thanks." So we went back, and so when they let us in, sure enough, they locked the doors. We started calling everybody, trying to get the theater wasn't even full. This was the second public showing in the world behind Kabul.
Wow.
They got the first showing. We got the second.
Wow.
So it hadn't even been released yet. So the sergeant major has a bunch of coins and toys and stuff, or coins and watch and this and that. And they call, they're doing some trivia. And of course I got at least one of the trivia right. And then they said, who can do the Imperial March? And somebody, one of the guys pushed me up there with this other guy. He's like, "Okay, done, done." And I got into it. I'm like, "Come on, you guys, everybody." I'm doing, the whole, like they do at the football games and all that. So I won. That was probably the most enjoyable part of a deployment, kind of just fun silliness, was being able to see that early of a showing of Star Wars. And so when people talk smack about Star Wars movie, I'm just like, I loved it. It was great because I have that emotional attachment to it. So I still have the hat upstairs and the T-shirt. So yeah, I loved it.
That's an amazing. That's the first time I heard that story. That's insane. God, now I wish I wouldn't have missed it. Mark, what about you?
I got nothing. I mean, you put me on the spot, and I'm out.
Oh man, I back when I was a platoon sergeant, I remember taking my guys, and we had a tab battery. It wasn't a big unit. I want to say we had maybe 53 soldiers in the whole battery. So I decided to take my platoon out, and we did an old school bar crawl, right? And I took my platoon out. It was, I want to say maybe 15, 16 guys. And we literally sat at the bar. We overtook the bar. We commandeered by force the bar, and then I made them sit down by rank. And we literally bought shots down the rank. And I, looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, now I don't drink anymore. That was probably not the best idea. But it was one of my proudest moments because it was one of the first times I was able to get all my guys together and just kind of, what I'm saying? They were so used to seeing, this, mean authoritative figure. That was the first time we were able to kind of just get together and let loose. And then, I remember my wife killed me once she saw the credit card bill, though. But, I had taxis lined up for us to all get home safe and whatever. But, we literally went to 3 different bars, and like we bought shots from the platoon sergeant, section chiefs, all the way down to the to the privates. And then the next bar we started with the privates and coming all the way up, and it was a phenomenal time. And like, even now, I still get some of the guys from those days like, man, I've never experienced that. That was the one and only time I've ever experienced that in my entire career. And I was like, man, I was like, yeah, drinking's bad, but I'm glad we were able to experience that together. You know what I mean? It was just one of them things where I don't know. It was, things were rough. The command was on our, we'd been in the field, we were doing 45 and 15s training to go to this fictional place that never popped off. And it was just rough, man. So I figured, hey man, let me get the boys out, kick our hair back at least this one time, Cinco de Mayo. We'll get a couple of tacos, buy a couple of shots. The intent was just to, do it one time, send everybody home. But then one time turned into, staff sergeants like, oh, I got the next one. All right, well, this bar's tapped out. Let's go across the street. And then, so now you got a whole platoon of soldiers. And I mean, I tell you, we couldn't, the best memory I have is we couldn't have been more different, right? Like you got hip hoppers and you got goth heads and you got metal guys with like chains hanging off of their pants and juggles, you know what I'm saying? And we're all just walking in this unit. And like I never forget, man, the people were looking like, who is this mess of individuals? You know, just crazy. Like one of my soldiers, you know, when he's off duty, he spike his hair up. So, you know, he's out with all this weird spiked out hair and chains and stuff. And, you know, he's walking next to my other kid from Brooklyn and he's got the fitted cap and Tim boots and like the big pants on, and they're laughing and joking. And it was special to see. And that's one of my, you know, that's one of my fondest memories of being a platoon sergeant, to sit back and be like, man, that one time, nothing else mattered. You know, 16, 18 guys just loving each other, man. You know what I mean? And that I hold that memory very special for me in Cinco de Mayo. But yeah, that always sticks to me. All right, so 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Here we go. Final thoughts, man. This thing went by way faster. Chappie, you go first. Mr. Baker, you get to bring us up on the rear. We'll close this thing on out, man.
Last thoughts. Well, I will say that I'm jealous. Now, Mark, are you in the Phoenix area or Tucson?
Sierra Vista. So
you're in Sierra Vista. Okay, you are in Sierra Vista. So I'm jealous whenever I see Facebook that has a little 3D Private Murphy somewhere that says, if you know where on Huachuca this is, go get it. Because I'm sitting going, I want one of those. So I think it's great that you do that, because Huachuca is not the most entertaining post to be on. There's not. Huachuca's fine while you're there, as long as it's short term. But I think it's great that you do that. And if you're watching this and you're in Huachuca, and I don't know if I haven't seen one recently, but I think it's great, those little 3D Murphys that you put around. It looks like fun, and I appreciate what you're doing for the soldiers that are stuck at Fort Huachuca.
Come on, isn't that bad? This is my home, man. But no, I need to have a few more of them printed up. I've got a buddy that does it for me. But Lance, where are you at?
I'm at Fort Eisenhower. So at Gordon, I'm looking at retiring next June. So I've got about a year left.
Okay, because I want to give other soldiers the opportunity to find them on other forts, right? So I do have some friends that I've sent them to, and they'll put them out for me and do the same thing, like put up on their Facebook, hey, here's a Murphy toy. Figure out.
Oh, I got you then.
So
I got you if you want.
If you want to give me your address, I can send some out to you. If you wouldn't mind putting them out there for some people. I mean, you could keep some too, but
that's what I like to hear.
If you're willing to do that, that's awesome.
Oh, absolutely. I'll send it to you when we're done.
Okay.
Or sometime this week. But yeah, for sure. That sounds great. See, people, this is how you connect. You just reach out and you just talk to people.
Old school lesson. So what are your thoughts, Mark? Final thoughts. How you feeling?
Well, I'd like to thank you for having me on. I'd also like to say that when you first approached me, Lance, I told you this really isn't, my jam, doing a podcast or interviews or anything like that. But it was fun, and there's just something about this permanent record being out there on the internet forever that's, disconcerting. But thank you. It was fun. It was fun talking to you too. And I think you both are very interesting guys. I really like what you're doing with the podcast. Pretty cool.
That's awesome, man. All right. Well, that gives us time. We are less than 60 seconds away. So, boom. Same bat time, same bat channel next week. Wait, no, next week's Mother's Day. So we got to talk about that. Either way, we'll see you guys on the flip side, Mr. Baker. It's been a complete honor. I am definitely checking this off on my box as one of my favorite interviews. Thank you so very much for coming out. And to the people out in the world, we are out. We'll see you guys later. POGs out.